Hey.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bari Connected. And we have our November support group here. We're talking to Katie Chapman. Such an amazing pleasure, as always. Katie has joined us several times before, and it's a topic that I think is so important nowadays is gut health. So, Katie, say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat today and geek out with everyone.
She always has such a amazing way of sharing and so much knowledge, Katie. You've been in this industry for some time. I'm going to go ahead and kind of just talk a little bit about your bio.
Sure.
She is in the field of bariatric nutrition, digestion issues, hormone health since about 2008, and really just brings it home.
Mm.
You're also, we were just talking because she is very involved with the American Society for Metabolic Bariatric Surgery. So, at
Yeah.
a fundamental level, those are the people that help with creating amazing programs around the United States, like basically helping with certification processes and like standardization of care for the bariatric patient.
Yeah,
So,
you're exactly
Katie, tell
right.
us a little bit more about all of that and what you do in working with your clients and who you work with. And I also want to say, welcome everybody that is joining us and saying hello too as well.
Yeah, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm seeing everything come through too of the hellos. So, you're exactly right. I've been doing this for quite some time. I'm a registered dietitian, and I've been a registered dietitian since 2008. So, whew, quite some time. I'm coming up on 17 years now. And so I have been in the field of bariatric nutrition the entire time. And I also work with gut health and hormone health. And I have a private practice and used to work more hospital based. And then also, as far as like ASMBS, like I've been actively involved with them and have spoken at their annual conference probably since 2015. And really, really love this community and love this subject because there's so much just information. We're always learning new things of how to take better care of ourselves and our bodies, especially with the surgery. So I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. What can people who are joining our call expect to learn from today's call? What will you be talking about and sharing?
Sure, sure. So today we are talking gut health. Okay. So I want to get just a better understanding and education of just when you hear gut health and microbiome, what exactly does that mean? What are we looking at? Also, what are some foods to help us with that microbiome? What are some foods that are not helpful? Um, Understanding like supplements, like probiotics. We hear about that, but kind of what that is. And then how to tell when things are off and maybe what to do a little bit about that. So that's kind of what I wanted to go over today, since I think it's such an important topic. Your gut helps to communicate with almost everything in your body. And also, it helps to absorb those vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And so we want to make sure that that's a nice environment to be able to do that.
Maybe I've heard several times too. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know
Oh,
you can answer any question. If you can't answer it, you just tell me. But I'm curious. I've heard that the stomach is almost like the second brain or the
brain.
second, yes. Like tell us what
Yeah.
that means because I've heard that several times.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of what they're talking about is our digestive tract that includes our stomach. We have this powerful kind of gut brain connection. So our digestive tract communicates with our brain and vice versa. Our brain communicates with our digestive tract. So sometimes, right, we can say like, oh gosh, if we're really anxious or we're really stressed, sometimes we feel it in our stomach.
Yeah.
And right, vice versa, like if our stomach, our digestive tract isn't feeling so well, that can affect our brain. And little more details with that. So our stomach and our digestive tract, it produces about 90% of our serotonin, which is our hormone that makes us happy, like that tells our brain we're happy. And it also, our digestive tract can influence our norepinephrine and our dopamine levels. So that helps like with motivation or that feeling of excitement. And so why it's called that second brain is because it helps to either make or influence these really important signals to our brain to let our brains kind of, maybe know what to do or give a better sense of reaction. And so that's why they call it that second brain is because of all of those processes.
Interesting.
I
Well,
know,
let's
crazy.
just jump right in then. I mean, and two, I also want to invite, we have people here in our Zoom community, and then we also have people on Facebook that's joining.
Yeah,
If anybody has questions, please post them in the
ask away.
chat feature. We also have a Q&A box if you're on Zoom. But please let us know. So, Katie, in that, let's get started.
Okay, okay. So I kind of, I love to have some visuals and pictures here. So I might share my screen here in a bit, but I think whenever and yes, I'll agree, everyone ask away. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think this is such a topic that's, talked about and it's like, hey, let's talk about gut health. And we hear about how important it is, but we don't always know exactly maybe what what that includes or what we're talking about or even what the microbiome is. So I wanted to just give a better sense of all of that. So I'm gonna get little visual here so I can kind of help that out in some way. And so hopefully, yeah, I can kind of share my screen here. And I'm going to make this bigger so we can all take a look at it. But kind of what we're talking about here in that gut microbiome is we're talking about these lovely little gut bugs, okay, that includes bacteria and some other things called archaea and eukaryotes. But what those do is they affect several things. So they affect metabolic health, so metabolism. They affect disease or disease states. They also affect our immunity and kind of rule our immunity. So sometimes if people's health tell me, hey, I get sick all the time, I actually take a look at how their gut is functioning. And so that kind of gut community or microbiome includes all of these different types of just kind of gut bugs. And then they do a lot of communicating, including that second brain part. I'm so glad you mentioned that because it does affect our mood as well. And so with this, we kind of do that signaling, right? So that's why I say it affects like our mood, it affects like our nutrients and those absorption. I kind of put like our endocrine system here. So that could be like blood sugars, it can affect. And so a lot of those signaling that happens from the gut and from those little gut bugs as well. And so that's basically, honestly, like how this whole incredible system works hand in hand. And I'll kind of pause there, Brenda. Does that make sense? Or, I want to make sure that it makes sense for us in here.
I think so. I mean, from my
Yeah,
standpoint, I think I'm understanding it.
yeah,
I feel like your slides are pretty simple. You simplified it for us.
yeah,
If anybody out there does have questions, though, please put it in the
yeah,
chat box or in the ask a question feature, and we'll definitely go from there. How about you guys
yeah,
out there? Are you understanding? Let us know. Uh,
yeah, yeah. Let me
we have
know. Oh, sorry.
this is
Yeah.
from Maria. She's a
Oh,
bariatric coordinator. What is the number one thing you would like communicated to bariatric post-op patients?
kind of great question. So I think my one thing that I would say is that we're kind of looking at this little system here. And after bariatric surgery, which is a surgery on the digestive tract, that kind of microbiome, so right, these kind of three major players can kind of be shaken up a little bit. And so after surgery, it's kind of important to, one, maybe eat in a way or add some things that help support this coming, I say kind of coming back, but support it kind of that environment. So after that surgery, and I always kind of envision like a house being shaken up and then put down, and it's like you got to put the socks back in the sock drawer and the utensils back in the kitchen. And so after surgery, we want to use some potential foods that help to support putting things back in the right spot. And or potentially like a supplement such as like a probiotic or something like that to be put in the that back in the right space. So that's what I would kind of think through of wanting to make sure that we have just some things that after surgery we're thinking through to just kind of help things be a little bit more healthy.
That makes sense. Also, there is another question coming in too as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Maria, this is another Maria. She says, what is the most important thing that should be done before surgery? Vitamins, water intake, eating habits, protein, wait to finish eating, to drink. Like, what would be like, I know, Katie, you've literally seen
Wow.
thousands of bariatric
Yeah.
surgery patients and talked to providers. I
Yeah.
feel like all of those things are important, but
I
what would
know.
you say? What would you say?
They're like, wow. Okay, wow. So,
It's a lot.
yeah, I think all of those, great question, because I think all of those are really important. I think what can be very helpful before surgery is getting used to those eating habits. Okay. So, because there's such a foundation that you want to return to after surgery. And right after surgery, you're healing, you're maybe modifying like the texture of foods, right, to aid in that healing process. So, meaning like now I'm drinking protein shakes or I'm doing things in liquid form. And so, that being said, is like, oh my goodness, we return to that foundation of those eating habits. So I would say that would be, if I'm looking at most important, not to say that all of those things aren't important, but I love to build a really great foundation that you can return to after surgery. I don't know. They're all
No, that's
great.
great. It's yeah, that is, I mean, habits is one of the biggest things I think just even post-surgery changing.
Yeah,
Katie, I
yeah.
do think there is a couple more questions came in. Do you want to hold on those for a moment or do you want to address
Yeah,
those?
yeah. So why don't I talk through, because I know a couple people, and I'm kind of looking here too, like as far as like prebiotics and probiotics and stuff like that. So let me take a point, like a moment to talk through about those. And then I'll come back and circle around to make sure either I answered them or to answer other questions that came in. How about we do that?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So, ladies, that we're going to be answering your questions here in
So
just a moment.
yes, yes, because the one is like, hey, what are prebiotics and what are probiotics? And so I'm gonna kind of like go through here and just take a quick look here. So here's what I like to describe as like prebiotics, probiotics, and symbiotics. Okay, three very distinct things. So you have these great little gut bacteria, and what I would say is a probiotic is adding more bacteria. It's adding more people to the party. Okay. So think of it like that. Like a probiotic is adding more people to the party. A prebiotics are food for the gut bacteria. So prebiotics are kind of like great appetizers for that party. Okay. So you kind of essentially, and prebiotics you can get from food. So can probiotics, but prebiotics are a little bit more forthcoming in food because they're in those fibers. Okay. So think of like fruits and vegetables. I always mention, yes, you can get it powder and capsule, but that's what we're looking at as far as a prebiotic. And so you want a little bit of both, right? You want great people at your party, but you also want that party to be fed too. And so in a capsulated form, a prebiotic and a probiotic is what's called a symbiotic. Okay, so those are three really distinct different terms, but good to kind of know like, okay, well, which one is this and which is doing what? So when people are kind of looking and I can talk supplemental, but when I'm kind of thinking food wise, a probiotic is going to be things that are like fermented. So maybe that is like a pickled or a fermented food, or someone on here mentioned kind of like kefir or even a kimchi um, or a kombucha. Those are all probiotic foods because just from that process, it creates some of these it creates some of these bacteria that gets added to the party when you eat those food. A prebiotic comes from mainly your fruits and your vegetables. You're looking at fiber from plant and fruit sources. Okay. And so there's fibers kind of a whole other discussion, but when I tell people when I'm looking for prebiotic, I'm really looking for like food and color, okay, and fiber. So that's what I'm looking for a prebiotic because that feeds everything. That's like those appetizers. And then a symbiotic is just making sure that food wise you have a little bit of both, right, happening. You're adding some people, you're getting some fiber in there. And so that's kind of what we're looking at food wise. I'm going to pause. So, and thanks, Mara. I see the best explanation. Like, I like to think of it a party situation. Um, but so I'm going to take a moment to kind of go back, and I know there's some questions here and even more of like prebiotic, probiotic. So I thought that would be a good starting ground, and then I can get detailed depending on the questions. Do you want me to take
Yeah.
a look at that, Brenda, or you kind of want to
I,
introduce them, maybe?
you know what? I think you answered Jody's question. So just basically, I think you answered most of her question. Nicole
Okay.
says, how long in general does it take post-op for the stomach digestive tract to heal itself? I know it's loaded.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
loaded question, probably very individual. So I'm thinking that she means post-op being bariatric surgery.
Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, it could be any other surgery too as well, like if you're
Mhm.
any kind of digestive issue surgery, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think like with healing, what I would say is like you're looking at like a couple things, right? You're looking at one, the tissues healing, right? If we had something cut, then we have the tissues actually healing. And then we have kind of like that digestive tract kind of like environment. And that's what we think of as the house being shaken up and put down, and you got to put everything back in the drawer. So I think that when I take a look at this, I'm like, okay, tissue healing is usually within those first kind of 6 weeks is where that tissue healing you see. And again, individualized, but in general. And then when I'm talking like gut environment, that's usually like a good 3 to 6 months, actually. So that's why, at first, we are thinking of tissue healing right after surgery and some of the things that help support that. But that's where this whole like prebiotic, probiotic, some of the things that we may choose to eat or may choose to take can be really helpful at first and starting to add in. And obviously that environment can kind of change over time, but that's what I would probably say my how long to give some timeline there. So,
That's super helpful.
yeah.
Um, there are more things coming in. Do you want to
Okay.
keep going or do you want to answer more questions? What would
Yeah,
you like to do?
let's answer a couple more questions just because I know and I can maybe jump to a point. I'm trying to keep up with questions too as they're coming in as well, Brenda. So that's what I'm kind of looking at as well. So let's answer a couple more questions and then I'll kind of circle back here of kind of I'm talking a bit more gut health, but it sounds too of like there's some great questions not only on gut health, but some other things too as well.
It's probably leading into more of your presentation because I feel like
Lovely.
some of this. Can you suggest good pre and probiotics?
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of look at like so the two main things in a probiotic is going to be a lactobacillus and a bifidobacterium. Those are the two strains. So that's kind of the two most, common strains. And I always like to look for a variety. When I look at the bottle, I usually want at least five different strains. So it might be bifidobacteria something, bifidobacteria something, and those are all different strains of bacteria. So and lactobacillus something, those are all the main kind of, I would say, big families of them. And so that's the main one. ProCare has a really nice one as far as blend there. Um, and I can always say that I tend to what I suggest with probiotics is I usually tell people kind of pick 2 to 3 probiotics bottles. You're looking for 5 of different strains and at least 1 billion CFUs. So that's colony forming units. And why I usually suggest 2 to 3 different bottles is you oftentimes, to add variety to that party, you oftentimes want to switch them out every 6 months. So what I might do is I might be like, oh, okay, let's do ProCare for a little bit. Okay, let's do that. And then let's switch it out with something else. And there's quite a few nice ones there on the market. It's hard for me to kind of be like, get this particular one because everyone's in so different areas. So a lot of them are area specific. So what I can say, my best, probably helpful things for people is to say, go and take a look and you're looking for 1 billion and you're looking for 5 different strains. So that can kind of be helpful in that. Um, Prebiotics, someone mentioned, can you suggest a good prebiotic? Usually I'm going to suggest it through food, but if I'm having to look at a powder form, I'm usually looking at one that's called Acacia, ACAIA, Acacia. I think there's a C in there too. I'm more visual. I think I would have to write it out. So, but with that acacia fiber, that's pretty one that you can kind of get everywhere. And that would be more in a powder or a capsule form if I'm having to do a prebiotic. Hopefully that helps. Man, I could get in the weeds with all the different kind of types, but as you're looking, that's what I'm kind of trying to look at. Yeah. So, um, let's say this. I'm going to switch gears here of kind of going, hey, what are some particular foods that may be helpful for this? Particular foods that may not be helpful. And then I'll circle back to a couple questions and kind of help out there. Does that sound like a plan, Brenda?
That's
I hope
perfect.
so.
Honestly, that's perfect.
Okay.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, because I know all the questions are like so great and I can be very specific if I need to of what I can kind of see. But I want to make sure, hey, if you leave here today, what are some specific things that you can add? And what are some specific things that are not so helpful that might be good for you? So, foods that don't tend to help your gut microbiome, artificial sweeteners. So I do take a look at like how much or how many things that we may have that is like a sugar-free but has an artificial sweetener. Just because from a gut health perspective, they don't help that environment as well, and they don't help support that as well. So what I might tell people to lower those is I might say, like, if you're using something that is like a sugar-free, like powder for your water, I might say, hey, like use less of that and dilute it so we don't have as much of that artificial sweetener, but you still have that taste that you might like. Okay. I look at added sugars and high fructose corn syrup. So, part of that is like maybe I'm going to look at my label to see how many sugars are added versus what's in there naturally on my label. And I'm going to look at the ingredients to go, hey, is it cane sugar or is it a high fructose corn syrup that's added? They just don't tend to help. And I saw the question come in about stevia and monk fruit. So, your monk fruit is a natural sugar. So, still, always I'm looking at amount. Okay, so high amount is not going to be helpful, but that's going to be a natural sugar. Stevia is considered, it's kind of in two categories. So why I say this is like when stevia is added to a highly processed food. So I always think of like something that's packaged and maybe that's a maybe that's like a muffin. I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there, but that uses stevia in it. With that processing of stevia, it doesn't make it as helpful. It starts throwing in that, highly processed food. And then with our artificial sweetener, it takes kind of more of that effect. If we're using a stevia that comes from the plant or that is a base that is a dropper, again, I just look at amount and, in part with that amount, making sure that we're not too high of amount. So someone said most commercial monk fruit isn't pure monk fruit. I think what you have to look at is this is where it gets all muddy, right? Monk fruit itself. Okay, we still got to look at the amount. But when you start looking at something that's packaged or start looking something that is processed, it takes on a little different angle. So ideally, what we're trying to get, hopefully, is the most thing that's the most straightforward, right? Like something that we're knowing that is like, hey, is this a fruit or is this a vegetable or is this protein. So that's what we're trying to get at. Again, like a lot of these can be really confusing, but what I'm looking at is look at amount and look at how much processed it is. Trans fats go into that processing point, and then high consumption of red meats or processed meats. Things that I think can help, okay? So we have our prebiotic and our probiotic. I know I labeled them pre here, but some of them fall into both of those categories. So yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. We have our fiber, so that's coming from our whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, which is our kind of our beans, our fruits and our vegetables, and especially with our fruits and our veggies, I look for color. I want the brightest color possible because not only is that a great fiber source, that actually is helping in some antioxidants too that are also helpful for that gut microbiome. And then we look at our purple foods. So purple just in color. That's why I say color. And then I look at my butyrate foods, which just is a type of short chain fatty acid that comes from our beans and lentils, and our prebiotic fibers. So, right, I not only mentioned some of our fruits and vegetables, but specifically, we can look at our onion, garlic, leeks, asparagus, things like that. So that tends to kind of help in that way. So, um, why I kind of like this cute little picture here before I go, whoops, hello, wrong way. Before I go to looking at what doesn't help and kind of circling back on some questions here is that what we're trying to help, and when we're talking about the microbiome, we're kind of talking about all these three different, I always think three different distinct layers. So we have this kind of brown layer, which is our first layer. We have our middle layer, which is the kind of this white layer. And then we have this kind of third layer, and they kind of look like these little like fingers down here. And so what's nice and what helps with our microbiome is that we have kind of different bacteria in each of these sections. And when everything is really kind of nice and let's say healthy, we have these really distinct kind of helpful layers, and our body's able to do its job. When things start kind of going off, we can see in this kind of B, A or B. So B, we can kind of see how things kind of go off. So they start blending in together, and each layer doesn't do its job as well, which then can really make our body kind of have much more inflammation, and especially inflammation in the gut, because it's a protectant. I always think inflammation is kind of like a puffy coat that our body kind of puts on to be able to protect itself. And so when people are talking about gut microbiome, this is kind of the reason in part of why we want each section to do its job. And so that our body doesn't have to do as much protectant, which then starts kind of affecting some of the other things. So I know that was a mouthful, but Brenda, I'm going to pause here and come back to you. Does that make sense? Did I kind of explain this a little bit in some
I
ways?
think so. I'm glad you went over foods and things like that too, because that can be so important
Yeah.
and knowing kind of how to put those things. And a lot of those things are just, I mean, after bariatric surgery or just on a weight loss journey, a lot of those things are really helpful just to have.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
Mm-hmm.
um, yes, definitely. And there is, I mean, there is a ton of things coming in too as far as questions. I myself don't have any questions, but I
Okay,
see some
let's
things. Do you want to take a few?
yeah, let's kind of answer some questions here, and I'll do my best to kind of answer them. I always try to sometimes not again in the weeds, and I know the artificial sweetener is sometimes such a question of like, what does this one do and what does that one do? But I mainly can tell everyone of like what we're looking at is we're looking at amount and kind of what it's in and how processed it is. And so, let's kind of circle back to some of these maybe other questions, and I'll do my best to kind of like answer them the best I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, okay, someone is asking, I had surgery last year. I was prescribed special vitamins with extra 45 milligrams of iron. Do I start going back to my prebiotics? My blood work and all my tests have come back good. Do I start them or do I have to ask my GI personally? And this
Yeah.
person that had the sleeve was not a good candidate for the other two due to health conditions.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I can say like general kind of rule thing, like with a pre and a probiotic. Like, of course, you can ask your GI, of course, like if there's any concerns or anything like that. But most from a general kind of GI perspective is what they typically will say is that usually with a pre and a probiotic, after surgery, they'll usually have people pause on taking a pre and a probiotic usually until you're pretty darn healed, which is within that first 3 to 4 months. So I've usually seen most kind of GI or most surgeons say, hold on your prebiotic until around that 4 month mark, and then you can consider going back on it. Um, Usually with lab work, let's say, like not only gut health doesn't always show up in lab work. Initially, it usually takes a really long time for it to show up in lab work. So I don't always wait for lab work to kind of say do a pre or a probiotic. I usually am having someone do that when they can after surgery. Hope
Great,
that helps.
great question. Yeah. Here's one from the Q&A box, and it's
Okay.
what are, sorry, my dog in the background. What are some low food map options for prebiotics? And to branch
Ah,
off on that,
FODMAP.
another person says that she loves kombucha, but she wasn't sure since it's fizzy if she should be drinking that
Uh-huh.
after surgery.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So we kind of have a couple of things. So first, I'm going to talk through, let's just kind of maybe talk through like a FODMAP, by the way. So, and what that is. So, oftentimes, a low FODMAP diet is an elimination diet that is um, oftentimes used that with like IBS, or if someone has a bacterial overgrowth, they'll utilize that particular diet. That is not a long-term diet. So you kind of do an elimination phase and then you add things back in to make sure you tolerate it. And then, some of the prebiotic fiber foods on the screen are part of some of the FODMAPs that people can feel that they might keep out on a longer term. So I always say that, I always like to make sure what that is and what we're talking about. So some other prebiotics that I think of that are not on here, and again, FODMAP covers a lot of things. So the ones listed on here are on a certain category, but other ones that you should be able to add in, I do think of berries, actually. My blackberries and my blueberries are really nice and helpful with those prebiotic fibers. I also think of my apple peel can be really helpful with a prebiotic fiber from that. That's um, not part of the fructans that are part of this list. I don't want to get too much. I could really get in the weeds on FODMAP. So just to kind of mention some of those, and I would say if you need to get in the weeds on this, then I'd reach out to your health professional to get a better map for you. And then with the kombucha and it kind of being fizzy, so it's a little bit different. That fizziness doesn't always come from carbonation. So look for your kombucha to be a non-carbonated kombucha. So after bariatric surgery, we're concerned, or what we're looking at is not to add more air in that stomach. And so that's where that carbonation comes from. It's the air part. So the fizzy, let's say, of a kombucha, oftentimes because of the yeast and some of the kind of probiotics that are made in there. So that fizzy tends to be okay, but the carbonation fizzy, not okay. Two different things.
Okay.
I know, lots of good kind of
I
questions there.
know there's so many more. Okay. I'm going to read one more and then I'm going to let you go back to
Hmm.
doing a little bit more presentation, then we'll
Yeah,
come back to
yeah,
questions again.
yeah.
Um, Jody says there are days when my poop is extra firm and days when I feel pretty loose. Is this indicative of post-bariatric surgery? I'm 4 years out, have lost 110 pounds, not at goal, but am working on the last 50. I have gone to Zepbound and I am slowly losing weight. Would this also affect gut biome? So I think she's
Lots
asking,
of things. Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Couple things. So let's say this. So both bariatric surgery and a weight loss medication, yes, they can affect gut microbiome in both good and not so good ways. Okay. So, a couple things that I would think of, like honestly, I would be like, I probably would add like a probiotic to your picture here, just because you have been on Zepbound, you had a previous bariatric surgery. They do affect that microbiome, and just to kind of help support it a little bit better, I do a probiotic for about 6 months. When you're talking about, let's say, bowel movements and how that looks like, I go, so because of a weight loss medication and that slows down the movement of everything through the digestive tract, some side effect of that is constipation and some change in bowel movement. So part of me is like, it could be indicative of like post-op surgery weight loss medication. It could be indicative of microbiome. You probably would have to work with a practitioner to really get a better understanding that if that is affecting you in a deep way. But there's a couple factors that could be affecting how your bowel movements look. So that's a hard, that's a difficult one word answer, let's say. But those are some of the things that I think about um, when kind of looking at this. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Let us know if that helped with that
Yeah.
answer, because I do think a lot of people post bariatric surgery do
Yeah.
struggle
Yeah.
with
Bowel movements.
constipation. Yes, and
Yeah.
then also all the weight loss drugs definitely affect that too as
Yeah.
well. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's why I kind of said, like, I was like, gosh, that's a little loaded question because it can tell you a bit about microbiome, but definitely constipation is part of both surgery and part of, you're right, weight loss medication picture. That, one, I always tell people fiber and water work together on helping your bowel movements. So that's like a first and foremost thing that I would check for constipation of like, oh, am I getting in enough fluid with my fiber? And that might be something that you can easily like tweak, and that might help your bowel movements a bit more. The other thing that I think of if we're talking constipation or things being a little bit more firm in there, then I start thinking about like, okay, we might need to do something like a magnesium or something a bit gentler that kind of helps this. But the first and foremost, I look at like just fiber and water. That sometimes when people try to increase their fiber, they don't increase their water, and do it gently um, through food. Yeah.
thanks, Katie.
Yeah. It's a tough one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking here. So I know there's more questions kind of coming in here. Maybe I will come back to this, some questions, but let me circle back to kind of talk through, since we're talking about things that, let's say, bowel movements and some things that can kind of show us some signs of an unhealthy gut. I do pay attention to like diarrhea and constipation and bowel movements. So I know I talked a little bit about that, and definitely things change after a bariatric surgery. Um, I always tell people like you get this kind of new normal, like this new normal afterwards. And so I do want to see what that new normal is, but if there's a really big shift in what that looks like, that could tell us a bit about your gut health. So I do pay attention to that. I also pay attention if there's pain or if there's gas or if there's bloating. And one thing that can oftentimes tell me a little bit more, especially with that bloating or that gas, is that if you wake up feeling okay, and then as you eat throughout the day, that gas and that bloating kind of gets worse, that just tells me a bit more of like, hey, we need to look at your gut health a bit more. And I would work with a practitioner to do that. Again, you can always try a probiotic to see if that works, but in all honesty, if you're experiencing something, then I say work with your practitioner. If there's a big change in fatigue or a big change in weight that you're just not understanding, that can tell us about gut health. And I know a lot of you are in your weight loss journeys, but if there's a really big shift in that, meaning I'm going along just fine and I'm losing this much per week and all of a sudden I have this really big drop that continues, that makes us a little nervous, or vice versa, gain, that makes us a little nervous, I think, about that. Fatigue and migraines, again, if it looks different or weird, that can kind of help us, like that can kind of tell us a little bit. And then if we use a lot of processed foods or sugars, that we might need to start switching around and then supporting our gut health a little bit more, again, with a probiotic and some prebiotics. So that's what I kind of look at with that sign of unhealthy gut, and at least just giving you some direction of if that looks out of the ordinary, these are some things that I think of. um, Gut health is complex. So there's some simple things for you to do at home, such as being like, let's try a probiotic and change around my foods that add in some prebiotics. But if it's something that continues, then I definitely would say, you know, definitely I would say by all means with a practitioner on this. So I'll pause there. Maybe we should answer some questions because I know more just keep coming in.
Um, let's go to a couple, maybe two more questions, and then we'll tie things up. I think
Yeah.
there's just so many things. I'm gonna see if I can pick
Yeah.
ones that maybe I think you might have answered Robert's question about he's 7 weeks post-op, apart from pre and
Hmm.
probiotics. How can you improve gut health when you start eating regular foods? And I think you mentioned a lot
Yeah.
of those foods.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I definitely would just think through of just kind of, hey, when you're adding things in, maybe let's use some superfoods to kind of help that. Purple, like purple color, purple is really helpful for that first layer. So that might be something that I'd be like, hey, let's see what you could add or where you could add that in. Where you could add that in. Yeah.
how about chia seeds? There's a couple comments
Chia
regarding chia seeds.
seeds. Yeah, so chia seeds is going to be part of those nuts and seeds. They're really, really great source of fiber. So, like, so one, it kind of is part of that like fiber family, and they add in both soluble and insoluble fiber. So I like them for that. They also can be anti-inflammatory too. So we like that for that. So I think chia seeds are really great. I usually would say chia seeds and flax seeds, ground flax seeds are my two top ones that if I'm looking at the seed family that I tend to think of. So I see
Perfect.
some chia seed puddings and I see some chia seeds in the morning too on all these notes here. So yes, I think all of that, yeah, can be helpful.
How about can you also speak to a healthy protein isolate, non-isolate, etc.? Curious as to what you think on different kinds of proteins and maybe how that also ties into this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely with our proteins. So okay, so kind of, breaking down a little bit of like the breaking down a little bit of the proteins for us because we have isolate, we have non-isolate, like what do all those mean? So we have different types of proteins if we're looking at them, with our protein powders. So isolate is going to be our most kind of, let's say, straightforward one. So meaning that the lactose and a lot of the fat um, molecules have been taken out of it, and we percentage wise of protein, it's the most straightforward. Our body doesn't have to kind of like get through some of the other things to get the actual source of protein. That is why after surgery, an isolate is recommended for that reason. We take out things that your body may not do well with, and then also it's pretty straightforward as far as like protein source. Then we have some of our other ones, kind of like a protein concentrate. Um, they'll non-isolate is sometimes mentioned even now. And what that means for us is that means that it's much more of it has more things, kind of things in there that are kind of like a filler. So it has more stuff that our body has to get through to get to the protein. And then usually it's not as filtered. So we'll get usually some of the lactose in there and maybe some of our fat molecules. So that is the difference between all of those. So I usually recommend for people to choose an isolate because it takes kind of some of that like, oh, what if I get
Hmm.
oh, I'm not really what I don't do well with lactose anymore. And I'm like, oh, an isolate solves that because it filters that out. And so that's what I kind of look at in terms of if we're talking about protein, let's say protein powder and what I kind of, will look for is I do look for that isolate form. I think I answered that one. So yeah. And that's the reason why. Yep.
Okay. Well, Katie, how can they get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with
Sure.
you? And do you see clients?
I do.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, all those things. So I think, and I'm like, listen, guys, I think I have so many things. So, right, here's some things, right? So contact information, website, Instagram. So yes, absolutely. I would always say I do see clients. And so I also have colleagues that work for me too that are well versed in this. So definitely, I always tell people reach out and I want to get you with the best fit. And also, depending on what state you're in, there's some states that I'm not able to go to, but my colleague is, and we want to get everyone well taken care of. So, happy to help in that way. If there's something that I can answer and it's a quick answer, I'm happy to answer it. If it's something much more involved, what I might do is, maybe Brenda will help us out or will help navigate that or set up an appointment time. And so that's kind of where you can reach me and check me out, I guess.
So, Katie, do you see patients in all states, or is there just a specific area that you can?
Yeah, no, I can do so there's most states and I say that between that myself and my colleague we can actually see people in most states and I usually tell people no problem, we'll help navigate that or I'm really well connected. So if it's something that like, oh, if it's a state that we can't see you in, then I will make sure like I get you navigated to someone that can see you in that state. But luckily, I can see people in most states. There's some rules with licensing and dietetics. And so I tell people don't try to figure that out because it gets complicated, but I can take care of that for you.
And I'm going to go ahead and pull up too. I posted your information, and if you're listening
Oh,
to
yeah.
the live event, you have it in the chat box. If you're listening to the um, replay, it'll be in the description for the event. So whether you're listening, we do have a Very Connected podcast and on our YouTube channel, and sometimes people listen from there. So look in the
Good.
description.
Yeah.
Katie's website is katiechapman.com. You can look at her about her and her team, how to work with her, book a complimentary call to talk to her. And anything else you want to say about your website
Yeah, no, I mean
or
our
what you offer?
yeah, gosh, I mean we work with people gut health, hormone health, and obviously bariatric surgery. But I want everyone to feel like the best that they possibly can, especially after surgery. Or, within this whole weight loss journey, whatever that looks like. And so we always look to try to bring the pieces together, but also have a really good understanding of like why we're doing something and how that will affect us to really make someone feel good. So reach out if I can help. And again, I'll try to help the best I can, but this is a complicated subject. So I hope that it gave some insight, let's say, as to just, how this kind of can, I don't know, be approached, let's say, and at least some starting pieces, some of the details I would say work with your practitioner on.
Well,
Yeah.
Katie, thank you for all of that. And also, I'm going
Yeah.
to jump on, if it's okay, I'm going to jump on
Yeah,
to the ProCare site
I am.
and
Yes,
share
please.
some information on some of the products maybe that
Yeah,
may complement what you just talked about.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
um, Katie also has always been a supporter of ProCare. I love
Yes.
you for that, and thank you. We do have a code set up for her, KC Nutrition 10,
Yeah.
KC Nutrition 10, and saves you 10%
Thanks.
off your orders. So have that in the chat
Yeah.
feature or in the description.
Yeah.
I'll be posting that on Facebook here shortly. And I'm going to share my screen one more time and jump on. While you were
Awesome.
talking about products, I kind of pulled up
Cool.
some of the products that you were talking about so that I
Yeah.
could um, click onto those really easily. So when you get to the ProCare Health website, it's just procarenow.com. Again, procarenow.com. And there is the first little tab says products, and then we have a listing of multivitamins, GLP-1 support, calcium, therapeutics, and protein. From the products
Interesting.
that Katie talked about in order, the first one was our probiotics. So have that. That's about halfway down on our therapeutics page. And I pulled that up and basically um, it is 50 billion CFU
Hmm.
probiotic
Yeah.
with 15 different strains. And when we go down here to this different kinds of strains, we
Yeah.
have those pulled up. Katie, is there anything you'd like to say about that specific product?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think this is great,
Mm.
right? It fits all of our buckets, right? I want at least five strains. And I want it above 1 billion. So definitely with that. And also they have a little bit of prebiotics in here too, which is kind of nice as well. So you're kind of hitting a couple bases on here. So yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
So we got that. And then the next product that I'm going to kind of pull up is our bariatric multivitamin for people who've had weight loss surgery. And actually, even those who've not had weight loss surgery can take this. It is for those who've had weight loss surgery, I would suggest two of them. For someone who's not had weight loss surgery, maybe one a day. And when I pull that up, here we go. We have it's basically exceeds the ASMBS guidelines for those who've had weight loss surgery, but then also let's go down here to the profile and it'll kind of tell us what's in it. Down here, it talks about the probiotic blend. So we have 15 billion CFU and then a whole listing of different kinds of
Mhm.
probiotics. I'm sure
Mhm.
Katie would be a little better at pronouncing than I would, but
Bacillus. There's a couple different types of bacillus and a couple different types of lactobacillus. And again, it reaches right. So again, we want at least five strains. So it does that and above 1 billion. So it's, yeah, pretty nice blend. And then we also have a little bit of prebiotic in there as well. Yeah.
So I got that. And then I'm going to go back up here. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is magnesium D, which this is made of magnesium oxide.
Yeah. Which can be
So
helpful for
yeah, so
constipation.
that's what I was going to ask you. So
Yeah.
tell us, support this one here was created around the
Mhm.
time of COVID because we had a lot of
Oh.
immune issues out there. And so it is actually an immunity support complex. So it not only has the magnesium, but it also has vitamin D3, zinc, and quercetin. Um, kind of an antioxidant blend for cellular
Mm-hmm.
protection. And
Yeah.
so kind of
So, yeah, I
um,
can like jump in here a little bit with that. So, because I was talking a bit before with the constipation, I was like, oh, magnesium. So the two types that of magnesium that can help with constipation is magnesium citrate and magnesium oxide, which is what this is. And so this also has a little bit of that added bonus with some of the things that help from that immune support. We also know that immunity comes through the gut as well. So not only do I kind of look at this as like immune support, but there's some helpful features in here, such as that quercetin, which comes from purple foods that help from the gut. So it's kind of a nice little, full circle thing that product that you might want to consider, not only just like, hey, immune health, gut health, but also if you're experiencing constipation, this might be one to really help.
wonderful. And
Yeah.
I'm going to go back up here. Magnesium also, there's been a lot that's said about sleep too, like to
Yeah.
help with sleep.
Hmm.
Whey protein. So we do have
Oh,
just came out, released this last week
yeah.
with an unflavored protein powder. Now this is
Yes.
whey protein.
Hmm.
And so anything that you'd like to say about this specific product, Katie?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, hot off the press here
Yes.
with this one, right? So
Like
what
very hot off the press, just
I
this last week.
I know. So that's why I'm looking here and I was just like, oh my gosh. So, so what I could say here is like just from the insights here, like you're looking at, right, your um branched chain amino acids, which is part of like amino acids are your building blocks of protein. So we like that. I always love actually an unsweetened and unflavored because it's really easy to add in with other things and not get in those artificial kind of sweeteners. And then you could kind of do your flavor yourself, right? If you're mixing up and maybe you're using a little bit of like honey or maple syrup or some berries or something like that to really sweeten it. The other thing, just because we're talking about gut health, is this kind of has that what's a component called glutamine, and glutamine is actually a really helpful component. That helps kind of and we saw with the pictures with the three different layers, those little fingers that were farther apart, which was not good in our inflammation sense. And glutamine helps, it's kind of glue that helps stick those together, that really help keep our gut microbiome and our gut kind of layers healthy. So nice for that as well.
Oh my goodness, we have a lot here. So
I
the
know.
products again, guys, were our probiotic,
Hmm.
our multivitamin, our multivitamin with it's a probiotic and a multivitamin. We had our magnesium, and then we had our protein powder. So I have those. Also want to
Yeah.
pop on. We also have a page set up. It's under the ProCare website under this button that says resources and our Bari Connected support. So Katie's is listed on this page. Many of you may have navigated to actually register for our event today. If you want to come back and listen to the replay, because there was a lot of information shared,
Yeah.
you could actually screenshot some of those pages so that you have that information like handy and be able to look over it. You can go back and register and listen again. We also put all of our replays on our YouTube channel and on our podcast. So the YouTube channel link is here. The podcast channel for those, it's under Bari Connected, and you'll find those links. You can just click on any of those to access that as well. Also, join our Facebook community. We have a page and a group. You can get the links on that page. Popping on to our Facebook, I'm sorry, our YouTube page, we actually have under there should be a little subscribe button, subscribe so that you can continuously listen. And I would suggest too, if you go there, there should be like a little search feature under that, and you can actually type in Katie Chapmon And under that, you're going to see all the events that we've done together. Look at that, Katie.
Oh
There's
my
been a lot.
gosh. Oh my
So
goodness.
all kinds of fun things that we've done. Gut health, we've done that before. Protein demystified, gut health, insulin resistance, protein power.
Oh my
Do
gosh.
your sex hormones change? That was a fun
Yeah.
one too.
Yeah, that was good. My gosh. So many fun things.
It is. It is definitely. Well, I will be putting those links for some of the things that I shared on our Facebook page here in a moment. And it looks like we have some really nice comments coming in. Thanks, guys, for the comments with ProCare vitamins. We appreciate you guys. And anything in closing, Katie?
My gosh, no, I mean, thank you for having me yet again. I always find it so fun to kind of break things down to make it, not so confusing because we hear so many things out there. So I'm happy to break it down and I hope it was really helpful and just add some things in there to help your gut health for after surgery. So yeah, or
Absolutely.
the weight loss journey, I should say.
And I also want to say, if any of you that are professionals on the call are going to ASMBS weekend, which is
Yeah.
in Kentucky this coming weekend, Katie and I will both be there. I'll be at the
Yeah.
ProCare booth. Katie will be speaking. I'm pretty sure, right, Katie? She's always
Actually, you know
speaking.
what? I actually know I get to just show up at this one. So you'll just see me running around with my red hair. That's just look for the red hair. There you go.
You can spot her. You can spot her. And so come and join us and say
Yeah.
hello. And if not, we'll
Yeah.
see you on the next. Very
Yeah.
connected. Thanks, everybody. Bye, Katie.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.